Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sleepless Campfire. Tonight, we travel into the forgotten backroads of America, places where light fades, and what remains are stories that refuse to die. Across these hills, rivers, and empty towns are accounts drawn from witness reports, police files, and archived broadcasts, each one verified, recorded, and retold in their own words. In the vast expanse of the Navajo Nation, spanning Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, tribal police officers serve as guardians of both law and tradition. Their jurisdiction covers 27,000 square miles of high desert terrain where ancient beliefs intersect with modern law enforcement. Here, officers patrol alone for hours across remote landscapes where cellular service disappears and radio communication can falter. What follows are 8 accounts from Navajo Nation police officers who encountered phenomena that defied explanation, incidents recorded in official reports, but whose resolutions remain as mysterious as the mesas at twilight. Now, let us begin with our first story. It was late November of 2014. Officer Thomas Begay had served with the Navajo Nation Police Department for 7 years, primarily patrolling the remote stretches of Highway 191 that cut through the desert like a scar. His shift began at 4 p.m. as the Arizona sun cast long shadows across the red rock formations that dotted the landscape. The temperature had already begun its rapid descent toward freezing, a common phenomenon in the high desert where daytime heat gives way to nighttime cold with startling speed. The dashboard of his Ford Crown Victoria cruiser glowed with the familiar blue light of the police computer terminal, displaying a map of his patrol area and a list of recent calls. Most days, the calls were routine traffic violations, domestic disturbances, occasional reports of livestock wandering onto the highway. But tonight would be different. Begay had packed his usual thermos of coffee, an extra blanket in case he needed to wait for backup in the cold, and his grandfather's medicine pouch, tucked into the glove compartment, as it always was. The desert air carried the scent of juniper and dust as Begay drove north toward the small community of Chinle. He passed the turnoff to Canyon de Chelly, where ancient cliff dwellings stood as silent witnesses to centuries of human history. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, painting the western sky in shades of orange and purple that quickly faded to deep blue. Begay clicked on his high beams as the road narrowed and curved, revealing the occasional jackrabbit darting across the asphalt. His radio crackled with the routine check-ins from other officers scattered across the vast reservation. At approximately 7:43 p.m., Begay noticed something unusual along the roadside. Another police cruiser, identical to his own, parked at an odd angle near mile marker 423. There were no flashing lights, no indication of an emergency stop. The vehicle appeared empty, its driver's side door slightly ajar. Begay slowed his cruiser and pulled behind the abandoned vehicle, running the license plate through his computer terminal. The registration came back as belonging to Officer Michael Chi, who was scheduled to patrol the Southern District that evening, some 60 miles away. Begay stepped out of his vehicle into the cold night air, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. He approached the abandoned cruiser cautiously, his hand resting near his sidearm. The driver's door swung open further as he drew near, revealing an empty seat and a still-running engine. The interior lights were off, but the dashboard glowed faintly. On the passenger seat sat a half-empty cup of coffee, still warm to the touch. Officer Chi's service weapon remained holstered in its usual position. The radio was tuned to the department's primary frequency, but only static emerged from the speaker. A thorough search of the immediate area revealed no signs of struggle or tracks leading away from the vehicle. Begay called dispatch to report the abandoned cruiser and request information on Officer Chi's whereabouts. The response was unsettling. Dispatch had not heard from Chi since his initial check-in at 6:15 p.m., when he reported investigating a suspicious vehicle near the Arizona-New Mexico border. That location was nearly 40 miles from where Begay had found the cruiser. As Begay waited for backup to arrive, he noticed something peculiar about the abandoned vehicle's tires. They showed no signs of the dust and gravel that should have accumulated during a 40-mile drive across desert roads. In fact, the tires appeared almost unnaturally clean, as if the vehicle had been lifted and placed at this location rather than driven there. The odometer showed only 12 miles had been driven since the cruiser's last fueling, though records indicated Chi had left the station with a full tank that morning. When backup arrived approximately 25 minutes later, officers conducted a more extensive search of the surrounding area with flashlights. They found footprints, but only one set, belonging to Officer Begay. There were no tracks leading to or from the abandoned cruiser, no indication of where Officer Chi might have gone. The department's K-9 unit was called in, but even the trained police dogs showed unusual behavior, whining and refusing to approach the vehicle, instead circling widely at a distance. The abandoned cruiser was towed to the department's impound lot in Window Rock for forensic examination. Investigators found nothing unusual, no fingerprints other than Chi's and Begay's, no biological evidence, no mechanical failures that would explain the abandonment. The vehicle's GPS data showed it had traveled only 12 miles from the station before stopping at its current location, where it had remained for approximately 2 hours before Begay's discovery. Officer Michael Chi has never been found. His case remains active in the Navajo Nation Police Department's Missing Persons Database, file number 14-729B. The abandoned cruiser was eventually returned to service after a thorough inspection revealed no mechanical or forensic anomalies. Some officers refused to drive it, requesting reassignment to other vehicles. The department eventually sold the cruiser at public auction, where it was purchased by a local rancher who reportedly experienced similar unexplained occurrences before having it scrapped. Several officers who worked the case quietly acknowledge that certain areas of the reservation hold dangers that cannot be explained by conventional law enforcement training. In the high desert, where ancient ways persist alongside modern policing, some mysteries remain beyond resolution. The empty cruiser stands as a reminder that even those sworn to protect and serve can become victims of forces that defy understanding. No trace of Officer Michael Chi was ever found beyond the abandoned cruiser that sat silently in the desert night, its engine still running, its driver vanished into the vast darkness. 3 months after Officer Chi's disappearance, another patrol would encounter something equally inexplicable across the reservation's eastern expanse. The high desert holds many secrets, and tribal police officers often find themselves witnesses to phenomena that exist outside the boundaries of normal police work. It was early February of 2015. Officer Jessica Yazzie had transferred to the Navajo Nation Police Department just 6 months earlier, bringing with her 8 years of experience from the Phoenix Police Department. She had requested the transfer seeking a quieter pace and a connection to her ancestral homeland. Tonight, she patrolled the desolate stretch of Route 13 that runs between the small communities of Lukachukai and Sheep Springs, a 45-mile corridor of 2-lane blacktop that sees little traffic after dark. The winter night was exceptionally clear, with temperatures hovering around 28 degrees. Yazzie had dressed warmly in her department-issued winter uniform, complete with the thick wool jacket that bore the Navajo Nation Police patch on each shoulder. Her cruiser's heater worked intermittently, a common issue with the aging fleet, so she had also brought a thermos of hot tea and an extra blanket. The dashboard clock read 9:17 p.m. as she passed the turnoff to the Toadlena trading post, its windows dark and boarded up. The radio traffic had been light all evening, just routine check-ins every hour from the 5 officers covering the massive district. Yazzie's cruiser was equipped with both the standard police radio and a CB radio, which many residents still used for communication in areas where cellular service was non-existent. As she drove, she listened to the intermittent chatter on the CB, mostly truckers coordinating their passage through the winding mountain roads. At approximately 10:42 p.m., Yazzie received a call from dispatch regarding a possible domestic disturbance at a residence 12 miles north of her current location. She acknowledged the call and proceeded northward, her cruiser's headlights cutting through the darkness. The road climbed gradually, revealing the vast expanse of the desert under a sky brilliant with stars. The Milky Way stretched across the horizon in a brilliant display that never failed to remind Yazzie why she had returned to the reservation, despite its challenges. As she approached the address, Yazzie noticed that the radio frequencies had become unusually quiet. Both the police radio and CB were filled with static, unusual even for this remote area where reception was often poor. She tried adjusting the dials but could not clear the interference. Dispatch had not responded to her last position update, which concerned her as procedure required acknowledgement of all officer transmissions. Yazzie arrived at the residence to find it dark and apparently empty. No vehicles were parked in the driveway, and no lights were visible through the windows. She approached cautiously, flashlight in hand, and knocked on the door several times without receiving a response. After checking with dispatch again, still met with only static, she decided to clear the scene and return to patrol, noting in her report that the call appeared to be a false alarm. As she drove back toward Route 13, Yazzie experienced something that would later be documented in an official incident report. At approximately 11:28 p.m., a voice broke through the static on her police radio, a voice that dispatch would later confirm was not that of any department personnel. The voice spoke in the Navajo language, saying what Yazzie would later translate as, "They are watching from the ridge. Do not stop." The transmission was clear, despite the ongoing static, and Yazzie immediately felt a sense of unease. She scanned the surrounding ridgelines with her spotlight, but saw nothing unusual. The voice on the radio did not identify itself and did not respond when Yazzie attempted to communicate. After a moment of silence, the voice spoke again, this time in English. "Turn around now. They are waiting for you at the crossroads." By this point, Yazzie had decided to return to the station rather than continue her patrol. As she approached the intersection of Route 13 and County Road 7, she saw what appeared to be several figures standing in the darkness just beyond the reach of her headlights. She slowed her vehicle but did not stop, watching as the figures remained motionless. When she passed the intersection, she glanced in her rearview mirror and saw no one behind her. The radio voice spoke one final time as Yazzie continued toward the station. "You were wise not to stop. Some roads are not meant to be traveled tonight." Then the radio fell silent again, replaced by the same static that had plagued it throughout the evening. When Yazzie finally reached the station 45 minutes later, she learned that no other officers had experienced radio issues that night, and dispatch had been attempting to contact her for over an hour without success. The following day, Yazzie and her supervisor returned to the intersection where she had seen the figures. They found no footprints or other evidence of anyone having been there during the night. The radio in Yazzie's cruiser was inspected by the department's communications technician, who found no mechanical issues or evidence of tampering. The radio logs showed no transmissions from Yazzie's vehicle during the time in question, despite her clear recollection of having received the mysterious warnings. Official Report 15-328A remains in the Navajo Nation Police Department's files as an unexplained radio communication incident. Several officers with knowledge of the case have privately suggested that Yazzie may have been warned of danger by a skinwalker, a shape-shifting entity from Navajo tradition that is said to sometimes communicate through electronic devices. The department has never officially endorsed this explanation, but the incident has become part of the oral tradition among tribal police officers. Officer Yazzie completed her assignment with the Navajo Nation Police Department before transferring back to Phoenix in 2017. In her exit interview, she mentioned the radio incident as one factor in her decision to leave, though she emphasized that she had experienced no direct threats during her time on the reservation. She still maintains that the voice on the radio saved her from some unspecified danger that night in the desert. The crossroads where Yazzie saw the figures remains a location that some officers approach with caution, particularly during the night hours. Whether the warning came from human or supernatural sources cannot be definitively determined, but the incident serves as a reminder that the high desert holds mysteries that defy conventional explanation. No official explanation was ever documented for the mysterious voice that warned Officer Yazzie that February night, though some older officers still avoid that intersection after dark. It was March of 2016. Officer Robert Johnson had been with the Navajo Nation Police Department for 3 years. Assigned to the Kayenta district in the northern part of the reservation. The 42-year-old former Marine had grown up in the area and knew the terrain better than most of his colleagues. His patrol today would take him into the remote region known as Black Mesa, a vast elevated landform that rises dramatically from the surrounding desert. The morning began unremarkably, with Johnson reporting for duty at 7 a.m. and receiving his assignments for the day. Among them was a welfare check on an elderly woman who lived alone in a remote hogan approximately 15 miles from the main road. The woman's daughter in Phoenix had not been able to reach her by phone for several days and had requested police check on her well-being. Johnson loaded extra water and emergency supplies into his cruiser, knowing that the journey would take him far from paved roads and reliable communication. The drive to Black Mesa took Johnson across varied terrain, from sandy desert flats to rocky inclines that tested his vehicle's suspension. The spring weather was mild, with temperatures in the mid-60s and a light breeze that carried the scent of sagebrush. As he left the main highway, Johnson engaged the four-wheel drive and followed a series of dirt roads that became progressively rougher. He passed several abandoned dwellings and the occasional free-ranging horse, their coats still shaggy from winter. After approximately 90 minutes of driving, Johnson arrived at the coordinates he had been given for the elderly woman's residence. A traditional hogan stood in a small valley, its earthen walls blending with the surrounding landscape. No smoke rose from the smoke hole and no vehicle was parked nearby. Johnson approached cautiously, noting that the wooden door was slightly ajar. What Johnson found inside would later be documented in Incident Report 16-417A. The hogan was empty, with no signs of the elderly woman who supposedly lived there. A thin layer of dust covered most surfaces, suggesting the dwelling had been unoccupied for some time. What caught Johnson's attention was the arrangement of personal items, a single coffee mug on a small table, a pair of moccasins placed neatly by the door, a blanket folded on a sleeping platform. Everything appeared orderly, as if the resident had simply stepped out for a moment. Johnson radioed dispatch to report his findings and request additional information about the missing woman. While waiting for a response, he decided to search the immediate area for any signs of the resident's whereabouts. That's when he noticed something unusual, a set of footprints leading away from the hogan toward a nearby mesa. The prints were clearly visible in the sandy soil, appearing fresh despite the lack of recent rainfall in the area. Following the tracks, Johnson proceeded approximately 200 yards from the hogan. The footprints continued in a straight line, showing no deviation or hesitation. What struck Johnson as odd was that the tracks appeared to belong to someone walking barefoot, despite the moccasins he had seen inside the dwelling. The prints were also unusually deep, as if made by someone carrying significant weight. As Johnson followed the tracks around the base of the mesa, he experienced something that would later become the central mystery of the case. The footprints simply ended not at a wall or obstacle, but in open ground, approximately 50 yards from the mesa. There were no return tracks, no signs of struggle, no indication of where the person might have gone. It was as if they had walked into nothingness and vanished. Johnson spent the next hour searching the area thoroughly, finding no other tracks or signs of human presence. He returned to the hogan and conducted a more detailed search, discovering a calendar on the wall with dates marked through the previous week, suggesting the dwelling had been occupied recently. He also found a half-full pot of what appeared to be herbal tea on a small stove, still warm to the touch. When Johnson finally returned to his cruiser, he discovered that his radio was no longer functioning. The display showed full signal strength, but all he received was static when attempting to contact dispatch. His cellular phone also showed no service, unusual even for this remote area where he normally could at least send text messages. Deciding to return to the main road where he knew he could get better reception, Johnson found that his vehicle would not start the engine turned over, but failed to catch, despite the fuel gauge showing a half tank. Johnson was forced to walk approximately 8 miles back to the main road, where he eventually flagged down a passing rancher who gave him a ride to the nearest town. When he returned with a tow truck and mechanic the following day, they found his cruiser started without issue, and the radio functioned normally. A thorough inspection revealed no mechanical problems that would explain the previous day's failures. Further investigation into the elderly woman's whereabouts revealed that she had no daughter living in Phoenix, nor any relatives who could have requested the welfare check. The woman who had lived in the Hogan, according to neighbors, had passed away 2 years earlier. The property had been vacant since that time, though neighbors occasionally saw lights there at night, which they attributed to teenagers using the abandoned dwelling. The Navajo Nation Police Department has no official explanation for the welfare check request that sent Johnson to the Hogan, nor for the disappearing tracks he followed. The case remains open in the department's files as an unexplained incident, with some officers privately speculating that Johnson may have been lured to the location by forces that operate outside conventional understanding. Johnson continues to serve with the department, though he now requests assignment to areas closer to populated centers. He has never spoken publicly about what he believes happened that day in Black Mesa, but colleagues note that he avoids the area whenever possible and carries additional emergency equipment even on routine patrols. The Hogan, where Johnson found the mysterious tracks, was eventually torn down by the landowner, who reported experiencing unusual occurrences whenever he visited the property. The site remains vacant today, marked only by a concrete foundation where the traditional dwelling once stood. No further evidence was ever found to explain the footprints that ended abruptly in the desert sand, nor the welfare check request that sent Officer Johnson to investigate an abandoned dwelling. It was July of 2017. Officer Maria Tsosi had been with the Navajo Nation Police Department for 5 years, working primarily out of the Tuba City District. The 34-year-old officer had grown up in the area and was familiar with many of the local traditions and beliefs that sometimes intersected with her law enforcement duties. Today's assignment would take her to a remote location in Little Water Canyon, where a hiker had been reported missing 2 days earlier. The summer heat was intense, with temperatures already approaching 95 degrees by 9 a.m. when Tsosi reported for duty. She dressed in the department's summer uniform short-sleeved shirt with the Navajo Nation police patch, tactical pants, and hiking boots rather than the standard duty shoes she usually wore. Her equipment included extra water, emergency medical supplies, and a satellite phone, as cellular service would be non-existent in the canyon where she was headed. The missing hiker was a 28-year-old graduate student from the University of Arizona who had been conducting research on traditional Navajo farming practices. He had last been seen by local residents 3 days earlier when he set out alone to photograph petroglyphs in a remote section of the canyon. Search and rescue teams had been looking for him for 48 hours without success, and now the police department was assisting in the effort. Tsosi drove approximately 25 miles on paved roads before turning onto a dirt track that wound its way toward the canyon. The landscape grew increasingly rugged as she proceeded, with red rock formations rising on either side of the narrow road. After parking in a designated area, she joined a small team of searchers that included 2 park rangers and 3 volunteers from the nearby community. The search party divided into 2 groups, with Tsosi joining one team that would descend into the canyon via a steep trail used primarily by sheep herders. The temperature in the canyon was even higher than on the rim, with the rock walls radiating heat absorbed during the morning hours. Tsosi adjusted her pack and checked her radio, confirming that she could communicate with the other search team despite the challenging terrain. The search proceeded methodically, with team members maintaining visual contact as they worked their way along the canyon floor. Tsosi noted the unusual silence of the area typically. She would hear birds, insects, or the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, but today the canyon seemed unnaturally quiet. Even the sound of the group's passage through the sandy bottom seemed muffled, as if absorbed by the surrounding rock. At approximately 2:15 p.m., one of the volunteers called out that he had found a camera case lying near a cluster of boulders approximately 50 yards from the canyon wall. Tsosi approached cautiously, examining the area for any signs of the missing hiker. The camera case was empty, its zipper closed as if it had been carefully placed rather than dropped accidentally. Nearby, Tsosi found a single footprint in the sandy soil, a hiking boot tread matching the description of the missing hiker's footwear. As the search team gathered to examine the evidence, Tsosi experienced something that would later be documented in her official report. From the corner of her eye, she caught sight of movement on the canyon rim, approximately 200 feet above them. When she looked directly at the location, she saw what appeared to be three figures standing silhouetted against the bright sky. They were too distant to make out clearly, but their posture suggested they were observing the search party below. Sosie pointed out the figures to her companions, all of whom confirmed seeing them. One of the park rangers attempted to communicate with the figures using a megaphone, but received no response. The figures remained motionless for several minutes before apparently moving back from the edge of the rim and disappearing from view. The team leader radioed the other search group to ask if they had sent anyone to the rim, but received a negative response. The discovery of the camera case and footprint provided the first concrete evidence of the missing hiker's route through the canyon. Search teams followed the direction indicated by the footprint, finding additional signs of passage: a broken twig here, a scuff mark on a rock there. The trail led toward a narrow side canyon that branched off from the main wash. As the team prepared to follow this new direction, Sosie noticed something unusual about the surrounding rock faces. What appeared from a distance to be natural formations now looked distinctly like carved faces, similar to the petroglyphs the hiker had been seeking. The search team proceeded into the side canyon, finding more evidence of the hiker's passage. At approximately 4:30 p.m., they discovered his backpack leaning against a rock wall near a small pool of water. The pack was open, with its contents neatly arranged beside it: food, water, a notebook, and camera equipment. Everything appeared to be in good condition, with no signs of struggle or haste. The hiker's notebook was open to a page with detailed drawings of the petroglyphs that covered the surrounding rock faces. As Sosie examined the scene, she once again caught sight of movement on the canyon rim. This time, there appeared to be 5 figures rather than 3, and they seemed to be moving along the ridge in a coordinated fashion. When she attempted to photograph them with her phone, the images showed only the rock formations, with no visible figures despite her clear view of them with the naked eye. The search continued until approximately 6:30 p.m., when failing light forced the team to return to the canyon rim. They had found no further signs of the missing hiker beyond his abandoned equipment. The decision was made to resume the search at first light the following day, with additional personnel and equipment. That evening, as Sosie reviewed the day's events in her report, she struggled with how to document the figures she had observed on the canyon rim. As a trained police officer, she knew the importance of factual, objective reporting. But what she had witnessed defied conventional explanation. She ultimately described the observations as unidentified persons on canyon rim without speculating on their nature or origin. The search for the missing hiker continued for 3 more days without success. On the 4th day, a resident of a nearby community reported seeing a man matching the hiker's description walking along a road approximately 10 miles from the canyon. When officers responded to the location, they found no sign of the missing person. The official search was called off the following day, though the case remained open in the department's missing persons files. 6 months after the search, the missing hiker walked out of the desert approximately 30 miles from Little Water Canyon, emaciated but alive. He had no memory of where he had been or how he had survived, and his camera contained no images beyond those taken before his disappearance. Medical examination revealed no injuries or physical ailments beyond severe dehydration and malnutrition. The hiker's account of his time in the canyon was fragmented and confusing. He remembered following the petroglyphs deeper into the canyon, then encountering what he described as people who were not people, who showed him things that cannot be photographed. He recalled being given food and water by these figures, though he could not describe what they looked like or where they came from. His last clear memory was waking up on a desert road with no idea how he had gotten there. Official Report 17-529B remains one of the most unusual in the Navajo Nation Police Department's files, documenting both the mysterious disappearance and equally mysterious reappearance of the hiker. Several officers who participated in the search have privately suggested that the figures observed on the canyon rim may have been related to the hiker's survival, though no official explanation was ever offered. Sosie continues to serve with the department, though she now approaches searches in remote canyon areas with particular caution. She has never spoken publicly about what she believes happened in Little Water Canyon that summer. But colleagues note that she often carries traditional offerings when working in areas known for spiritual significance. The petroglyphs that the hiker was seeking have since been examined by experts, who confirmed that they are authentic ancient carvings rather than modern creations. Some of the symbols correspond to traditional Navajo stories about beings who inhabit the canyon lands, though no direct connection has been officially established between these stories and the events of 2017. No definitive explanation was ever documented for the figures who observed the search from the canyon rim, nor for the hiker's mysterious disappearance and reappearance in the desert months later. The high desert of the Navajo Nation holds many secrets, some dating back centuries and others emerging in modern times. For tribal police officers, these mysteries sometimes intersect with their duties in ways that challenge conventional understanding and require a balance between traditional beliefs and law enforcement protocols. It was September of 2018. Officer Daniel Nez had been with the Navajo Nation Police Department for 12 years, making him one of the more experienced officers in the Kayenta district. The 45-year-old father of three had developed a reputation for level-headedness and practical approach to policing, which made what he would experience on the night of September 14th particularly unsettling for both him and his colleagues. The evening began routinely, with Nez reporting for duty at 6 p.m., and receiving his assignments for the night shift. The weather was mild for autumn, with temperatures in the low 70s and a light breeze from the west. Nez's patrol area covered the western portion of the district, including several remote communities that were accessible only by unpaved roads. He had packed extra supplies, knowing that his shift would take him far from the station and reliable services. At approximately 8:47 p.m., Nez received a call from dispatch regarding reports of unusual lights in the sky near the community of Navajo. Several residents had called to report seeing bright lights that moved in patterns inconsistent with aircraft or satellites. Nez was familiar with such reports. The reservation's clear night skies and low light pollution made it an excellent location for stargazing, and occasionally residents mistook conventional aircraft for something more unusual. As Nez proceeded toward Navajo, he maintained radio contact with dispatch, noting that he too could now see the lights in the distance. They appeared as bright white points of light that moved in formation, sometimes separating and then reconverging in patterns that did not match any known aircraft behavior. Nez had served in the Air Force before joining the police department and was familiar with various types of aircraft and their capabilities. When Nez arrived in Navajo approximately 45 minutes later, he found several residents gathered in the community center parking lot, all watching the lights in the sky. He interviewed several witnesses who described similar observations lights that moved silently across the sky, sometimes hovering in place before moving again at speeds that seemed impossible for conventional aircraft. One elderly resident noted that the lights appeared to be moving toward the area known as Black Mesa, which loomed darkly in the distance. Nez documented the observations in his field notebook, noting the time, direction, and characteristics of the lights. He also contacted the Federal Aviation Administration to inquire about any known aircraft operations in the area, receiving a negative response. The nearest airport with commercial service was over 100 miles away, and there were no reported military operations in the vicinity. As Nez prepared to leave Navajo, he received another call from dispatch, this time regarding a report of strange lights near the ground in an area approximately 15 miles northwest of his current location. The caller, a rancher who lived in the remote area, reported seeing lights that appeared to be moving along the ground behind his property, sometimes rising into the air before descending again. Nez proceeded toward the rancher's location, following a series of unpaved roads that became progressively rougher as he moved away from the community. The lights in the sky continued their unusual maneuvers, though they appeared to be moving farther away in the direction of Black Mesa. Nez noted that his vehicle's radio was experiencing increasing interference, with static making communication with dispatch difficult. When Nez arrived at the rancher's property, he found the elderly man waiting outside his house, pointing toward a ridge approximately half a mile away. There, Nez could see what appeared to be several lights moving along the ground, sometimes rising into the air before descending again. The lights were not bright enough to illuminate the surrounding terrain, making it impossible to determine their source or nature. Nez decided to approach the area where the lights were observed, driving his cruiser across the rough terrain with caution. As he drew closer, he noted that the lights appeared to retreat, maintaining a consistent distance from his vehicle. When he stopped, the lights also stopped, hovering silently in the darkness. When he proceeded, they moved ahead of him again, always maintaining the same distance. This unusual pursuit continued for approximately 20 minutes, with Nez following the lights deeper into the remote area. The cruiser's GPS system began to malfunction, showing the vehicle's location as a blank screen despite the clear view of the night sky. Nez's radio had by this point become completely unusable, filled with static that drowned out all attempts at communication. At approximately 10:30 p.m., Nez decided to discontinue the pursuit and return to the main road. As he turned his vehicle around, the lights in the distance suddenly accelerated, moving away at a speed that seemed impossible for any ground vehicle. Within seconds, they had disappeared beyond the ridge, leaving Nez alone in the darkness. The return journey proved challenging, as Nez found that the terrain appeared different from what he had observed on the way in. Landmarks that he had noted seemed to be missing or in different locations, making navigation difficult. After approximately 45 minutes of driving in what he believed was the direction of the main road, Nez realized that he was lost a particularly dangerous situation in the remote desert, where temperatures drop rapidly after sunset. Nez stopped his vehicle and attempted to re-establish communication with dispatch, but the radio remained filled with static. His cellular phone showed no service, and his GPS was still not functioning. Deciding to wait until morning rather than risk becoming more lost, Nez settled in for a long night in his cruiser, occasionally running the engine for heat. What happened next would later become the most puzzling aspect of Nez's report. At approximately 2:15 a.m., Nez observed a single light approaching his position from the distance. Unlike the previous lights, this one appeared to move steadily and directly toward him. As it drew closer, Nez could see that it was not a vehicle headlight but rather a pulsating white light that appeared to be approximately 10 feet off the ground. The light stopped approximately 50 yards from Nez's cruiser, where it hovered silently for several minutes. Nez watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern, his hand resting near his service weapon. After a few moments, the light began to move again, proceeding slowly along a path that led directly past Nez's vehicle. As it passed, Nez could see that it illuminated the surrounding terrain, revealing what appeared to be a road or trail that had not been visible before. The light continued down this newly revealed path for approximately 100 yards before stopping again. It then moved back in Nez's direction, stopping once more near his cruiser before proceeding back along the path it had illuminated. After repeating this pattern 3 times, the light moved away into the distance and disappeared. Nez interpreted this behavior as an invitation to follow the illuminated path. Starting his cruiser, he proceeded cautiously along the route the light had revealed. The path was clearly visible now, appearing to be a well-maintained dirt road that should have been visible even in darkness. Nez followed the road for approximately 15 minutes before arriving at a paved highway that he recognized as Route 160, approximately 30 miles from where he had originally become lost. The remainder of Nez's shift passed without incident. When he returned to the station at the end of his shift, he filed a detailed report of his experiences, including the unusual lights, the malfunctioning equipment, and the mysterious light that had apparently guided him to safety. His supervisor, familiar with Nez's reputation for reliability and practical approach to policing, accepted the report without question, though he noted that it would likely remain one of the department's unexplained phenomena. The following day, Nez and another officer returned to the area where he had become lost, attempting to locate the dirt road that had led him to the highway. Despite extensive searching, they found no evidence of such a road, only the rough desert terrain that Nez had originally traversed. The tracks left by Nez's cruiser were visible, but they led to an area with no indication of a road or trail beyond. Official Report 18-6112A remains one of the most detailed accounts of unexplained phenomena in the Navajo Nation Police Department's files. Nez never publicly speculated on the nature of the lights he observed, though colleagues noted that he began carrying traditional offerings on his patrols after the incident. He retired from the department in 2021, moving to Phoenix to be closer to his grandchildren. The lights reported over Navajo and the surrounding area have been observed on several occasions since 2018, though none have resulted in encounters as detailed as Nez's experience. The FAA has no official explanation for the sightings, though they note that the area's clear skies and low light pollution make it excellent for both legitimate and unauthorized aerial activities. No definitive explanation was ever documented for the lights that guided Officer Nez to safety that September night, nor for the mysterious road that appeared only in darkness and vanished by daylight. It was December of 2019. Officer Lucy Charlie had been with the Navajo Nation Police Department for just over a year, having transferred from a municipal police department in Utah. The 29-year-old officer was still adjusting to the unique challenges of policing in the reservation's remote areas where resources were limited and response times could be lengthy. Tonight's shift would take her along the desolate stretch of Highway 160 that runs between the communities of Kayenta and Tuba City. The winter night was cold, with temperatures hovering around 22 degrees, and a steady wind from the north that created drifts of snow across the highway. Charlie had dressed warmly in her department-issued winter uniform, complete with the heavy coat that bore the Navajo Nation Police patch on each shoulder. Her cruiser was equipped with snow tires, a necessity in this region where winter storms could arrive suddenly and create hazardous driving conditions. Charlie's shift began at 10 p.m., with her supervisor cautioning her about the weather conditions and advising her to proceed with caution on the highway, where blowing snow had reduced visibility in some areas. The department had already received several calls about minor accidents and vehicles stuck in snowdrifts, making this a particularly busy night for the small number of officers on duty. At approximately 11:30 p.m., Charlie received a call from dispatch regarding a report of a pedestrian walking along Highway 160 near mile marker 385, an area with no residences or businesses for miles in either direction. The caller, a truck driver who had passed the area, reported seeing a person walking in the emergency lane, apparently without proper winter clothing. Given the dangerous conditions, dispatch requested that Charlie investigate and provide assistance if needed. As Charlie proceeded toward the reported location, she noted that the highway conditions were deteriorating, with snow accumulating on the roadway and visibility reduced to less than a quarter mile in some areas. She reduced her speed and proceeded with caution, her cruiser's emergency lights flashing to warn other drivers of her presence. When Charlie reached mile marker 385, she initially saw no sign of anyone walking along the highway. She slowed her vehicle and scanned the area with her spotlight, but the blowing snow made visibility difficult. After driving back and forth along the approximately 1-mile stretch surrounding the reported location, Charlie was about to call dispatch to report that she had found nothing when she caught sight of movement in her peripheral vision. Approximately 100 yards ahead, Charlie could see a figure walking along the emergency lane, apparently moving away from her. The person appeared to be a woman wearing what looked like a light jacket and jeans, inadequate clothing for the severe weather conditions. Charlie accelerated slightly to close the distance, her concern growing as she considered the risk of hypothermia in these conditions. As Charlie drew closer to the figure, she noted several unusual details. The woman's clothing appeared dry despite the blowing snow, and her pace seemed steady and unhurried, as if she were unaffected by the cold. When Charlie was approximately 50 yards behind her, she activated her cruiser's public address system, asking the woman to stop and speak with her. The woman complied with Charlie's request, turning to face the approaching cruiser. As Charlie drew closer, she could see that the woman appeared to be in her late 20s or early 30s, with long, dark hair that was whipped by the wind. Her expression was difficult to discern in the limited light, but she seemed calm and unconcerned about the weather conditions or the approaching police vehicle. Charlie stopped her cruiser approximately 20 feet from the woman and exited the vehicle, approaching cautiously. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Charlie asked, her voice muffled by the scarf wrapped around her face. "It's dangerous to be out here in these conditions." The woman looked at Charlie without speaking for a moment before responding in a quiet voice. "I'm fine," she said. "I just need to get home." "Where do you live?" Charlie asked, already planning to offer the woman a ride to wherever she needed to go. "I can give you a lift." The woman shook her head. "That's not necessary," she said. "My ride is coming." Charlie looked up and down the highway, which was empty except for her cruiser. "I don't see any other vehicles," she said. "Why don't you let me take you somewhere warm? We can figure out how to get you home from there." The woman seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding slightly. "All right," she said. "Thank you." Charlie escorted the woman to the passenger side of her cruiser, opening the door for her. As the woman settled into the seat, Charlie noticed that she showed no signs of being affected by the cold, no shivering, no redness in her cheeks or hands, despite her inadequate clothing for the weather conditions. Once both were inside the cruiser with the doors closed, Charlie turned to the woman. "So, where can I take you?" she asked, ready to drive to whatever destination the woman provided. The woman looked out the window for a moment before turning back to Charlie. "There's a turnoff about a mile ahead," she said. "You can let me out there." Charlie considered this for a moment. "Are you sure? There's nothing out there but desert. Wouldn't you rather I take you to Tuba City or Kayenta where you can get warm?" The woman shook her head. "No, the turnoff will be fine," she said. "That's where I need to be." Deciding not to argue, Charlie proceeded down the highway, driving slowly due to the deteriorating conditions. The woman remained silent during the short drive, staring out the window at the passing landscape. Charlie occasionally glanced at her, noting that the woman's clothing appeared dry, and her breathing showed no condensation in the cold air inside the vehicle. When they reached the turnoff, the woman had indicated an unmarked dirt road that Charlie had never noticed before she stopped the cruiser and put it in park. "Are you sure this is where you want to be?" Charlie asked, concerned about leaving someone in this remote area in such severe weather conditions. The woman nodded. "This is fine," she said, opening the door and stepping out into the blowing snow. "Thank you for the ride." Charlie watched as the woman walked toward the dirt road, disappearing into the darkness and blowing snow. After waiting a moment to see if she would change her mind, Charlie proceeded back to the highway and continued her patrol, making a note in her log about the unusual encounter. The following morning, when Charlie mentioned the incident to her supervisor, she was informed that there was no turnoff at the mile marker she had indicated. Her supervisor, familiar with the area, confirmed that there was no dirt road or any other access point at that location, despite Charlie's clear memory of dropping off the woman there. Intrigued by this discrepancy, Charlie and her supervisor drove to the location the following day, finding only a continuous stretch of highway with no indication of a turnoff or dirt road. The tracks left by Charlie's cruiser were visible in the snow, but they showed only her vehicle no second set of tracks indicating where the woman might have walked after being dropped off. Further investigation into the incident revealed something even more puzzling. When Charlie reviewed the dashcam footage from her cruiser, it showed her stopping on the highway and speaking to someone through the open passenger window, but the footage showed no one actually entering or exiting the vehicle. The passenger door could be seen opening and closing, but no person was visible in the recording. Official Report 19-714B documents this unusual encounter, noting the discrepancies between Charlie's memory of events, the physical evidence at the scene, and the dashcam recording. The case remains unexplained in the department's files, with some officers privately suggesting that Charlie may have encountered a spirit being, though no official explanation was ever offered. Charlie continues to serve with the Navajo Nation Police Department, though she now approaches reports of pedestrians in remote areas with particular caution. She has never spoken publicly about what she believes happened that December night, but colleagues note that she sometimes carries traditional offerings on her patrols, particularly during the winter months. The area where Charlie encountered the mysterious woman has been the site of similar reports over the years, though none have been documented as thoroughly as Charlie's experience. Local legends speak of spirits that sometimes appear to travelers, particularly during severe weather conditions, though no direct connection has been officially established between these stories and the events of 2019. No definitive explanation was ever documented for the woman who appeared and disappeared in the winter storm, nor for the turnoff that existed only in memory and vehicle tracks before vanishing by daylight. It was February of 2020. Officer Samuel Tso had been with the Navajo Nation Police Department for 8 years, working primarily out of the Crown Point district in the southern part of the reservation. The 38-year-old officer had grown up in the area and was familiar with many of the remote communities that dotted the landscape, some of which were accessible only by unpaved roads that became impassable during bad weather. The winter had been particularly harsh, with heavy snowfall creating challenges for residents and law enforcement alike. Tso's patrol vehicle was equipped with special tires and emergency supplies, as even routine calls could become complicated in these conditions. Today's assignment would take him to the small community of Baka, a collection of approximately 15 homes located in a remote valley 25 miles from the main highway. The call had come in at 9:17 a.m., a report of unusual silence from the community. The caller, a relative of one of the residents, had not been able to reach anyone in Baka by phone for 2 days and was concerned given the recent severe weather. Tso knew the community well, having visited several times in the past for routine matters. He also knew that phone service in the area was unreliable at best, so the lack of communication might not necessarily indicate a problem. The drive to Baka took Tso across varied terrain, from snow-covered plains to rocky hillsides where the wind had scoured the ground clear. The temperature hovered around 18 degrees, with a brisk wind that created wind chills well below zero. Tso had dressed warmly in his department-issued winter uniform, complete with the heavy coat that bore the Navajo Nation Police patch on each shoulder. As Tso proceeded along the unpaved road that led to Baka, he noted that there were no fresh tracks other than his own unusual for a community where residents typically moved about even in severe weather conditions. The road itself showed signs of recent use, with tire tracks visible beneath the thin layer of snow, but there were no footprints or other signs of human activity. When Tso arrived at Baka approximately 90 minutes after leaving the main highway, he found the community unnaturally quiet. No smoke rose from the chimneys of the homes, no animals moved in the yards, no children played in the snow. The community appeared deserted, though Tso could see that the homes showed signs of recent occupation footprints in the snow that led to and from the doors. Wood piles that had been recently drawn from, curtains that moved slightly in the breeze. Tso parked his cruiser near the center of the community and approached the nearest home, knocking on the door several times without receiving a response. He tried the door and found it unlocked, opening it cautiously to peer inside. The home appeared normal, with furniture in place and signs of recent activity, a half-empty cup of coffee on a table, a book lying open on a chair, a blanket draped over the back of a sofa. But there was no one home. Tso proceeded to check other homes in the community, finding similar situations in each signs of recent occupation, but no residents present. In one home, he found a meal partially prepared on the kitchen counter, as if the cook had stepped away momentarily. In another, a television was on, tuned to a local news station, though the screen was frozen on a single image. As Tso continued his search of the community, he noted several unusual details. In several homes, he found personal items arranged in patterns that seemed deliberate, a circle of stones on a floor here, a series of feathers arranged in a line there. In one home, he found a traditional Navajo rug that had been folded into a specific geometric shape and placed in the center of a room. Perhaps most puzzling were the tracks Tso observed in the snow. While each home showed signs of recent activity around its entrance, there were no tracks connecting the homes to each other, nor any tracks leading away from the community. It was as if each resident had simply vanished from their immediate vicinity without traveling through the surrounding area. At approximately 12:30 p.m., Tso called dispatch to report his findings, requesting additional personnel to assist in a more thorough search of the area. While waiting for backup to arrive, he decided to check the community's small chapter house, a building used for meetings and community events. The door was unlocked, and inside Tso found something that would later become the central mystery of the case. The chapter house appeared to have been recently used, with approximately 15 chairs arranged in a circle as if for a meeting. In the center of this circle was a small fire pit, though no fire had been recently lit there. What caught Tso's attention was the arrangement of personal items placed on each chair, a piece of clothing here, a personal belonging there, as if each chair represented a specific person who had been present. Tso documented the scene with photographs, noting the specific arrangement of items and the absence of any signs of struggle or forced entry. He also noted that, like the homes, the chapter house showed no tracks leading to or from it, despite the clear evidence that it had been recently occupied. When backup arrived approximately 45 minutes later, Tso and the other officers conducted a more thorough search of the community and surrounding area. They used tracking dogs, thermal imaging equipment, and even a small drone to survey the area from above, but found no signs of the missing residents beyond the immediate vicinity of their homes. The search continued for 3 days, expanding to cover a radius of 10 miles from the community. Search teams found no evidence of the missing residents, no tracks leading away from the area, no indication of where they might have gone. The community remained silent and empty, with no signs of violence or struggle in any of the homes. On the 4th day, as officers were preparing to scale back the search efforts, something unusual occurred. A snowstorm moved into the area, dropping approximately 8 inches of fresh snow overnight. When officers returned to Baka the following morning, they found that the community was no longer empty. Residents were going about their daily activities as if nothing unusual had occurred. Smoke rose from chimneys, children played in the yards, and several residents waved to the approaching officers as if greeting old friends. When questioned about their absence, the residents seemed confused, insisting that they had been in the community the entire time and had no knowledge of any unusual events. Perhaps most puzzling was the residents' reaction when questioned about the chapter house. Several confirmed that they had attended a meeting there 3 days earlier, though they could not recall specifically what the meeting was about or who had been present. When asked about the personal items that had been found arranged on the chairs, they seemed genuinely confused, insisting that no such arrangement had been made. Official Report 2819A documents this unusual incident, noting the disappearance and reappearance of the entire community of Baka, the lack of tracks or other evidence explaining the phenomenon, and the residents' apparent lack of memory regarding the events. The case remains unexplained in the department's files, with some officers privately suggesting that the community may have participated in a traditional ceremony that created a spiritual separation from the physical world, though no official explanation was ever offered. Tso continues to serve with the Navajo Nation Police Department, though he now approaches calls to remote communities with particular caution. He has never spoken publicly about what he believes happened in Baka that February, but colleagues note that he sometimes carries traditional offerings when working in areas known for spiritual significance. The community of Baka has experienced no similar incidents since 2020, though some residents privately acknowledge that certain traditional ceremonies can create unusual phenomena that may not be understandable to those outside the community. The chapter house, where the mysterious meeting was held, continues to be used for community events, with no further reports of unusual arrangements or unexplained occurrences. No definitive explanation was ever documented for the silent community that vanished for 3 days before reappearing with no memory of its absence, leaving only the puzzling evidence recorded in Official Report 2819A. It was June of 2021. Officer Jennifer Keene had been with the Navajo Nation Police Department for 3 years, transferring from a suburban police department in Colorado, seeking a connection to her Navajo heritage. The 32-year-old officer was still adjusting to the unique challenges of policing in the reservation's remote areas, where resources were limited and response times could be lengthy. Tonight's shift would take her to the community of Mexican Springs, a small settlement near the western border of the reservation. The summer night was warm, with temperatures in the low 80s and a light breeze from the south that carried the scent of juniper and sagebrush. Keene had dressed in the department's summer uniform short-sleeved shirt, with the Navajo Nation police patch, tactical pants, and hiking boots, rather than the standard duty shoes she usually wore. Her equipment included extra water, emergency medical supplies, and a satellite phone, as cellular service would be non-existent in some areas of her patrol. Keene's shift began at 8 p.m., with her supervisor briefing her on several recent calls regarding unusual activity in the Mexican Springs area. Residents had reported seeing what they described as shadow figures moving through the community at night, though no formal complaints had been filed. The supervisor asked Keene to patrol the area and document any unusual activity she might observe. As Keene proceeded toward Mexican Springs, she noted that the landscape grew increasingly rugged, with mesas and buttes rising from the desert floor. The road narrowed as it approached the community, winding through rocky formations that created deep shadows in the fading light. Keene activated her cruiser's spotlight, scanning the roadside for any signs of movement or unusual activity. When Keene arrived in Mexican Springs at approximately 9:30 p.m., she found the community quiet, with most homes dark and apparently occupied. She proceeded to patrol the small settlement, driving slowly along the unpaved roads that connected the approximately 20 homes that made up the community. As she passed one particular residence, she noticed movement in her peripheral vision, what appeared to be a figure standing near the edge of the property. Keene stopped her cruiser and used her spotlight to illuminate the area, but found nothing unusual. She proceeded to the next residence, where she again caught sight of movement in her peripheral vision, this time what appeared to be a figure crossing the road ahead of her. When she illuminated the area with her spotlight, she once again found nothing unusual. This pattern continued as Keene patrolled the community. Glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision that vanished when she attempted to observe them directly. Each time, the figures appeared as dark shapes that moved with unusual speed and fluidity, unlike normal human movement. Keene began to suspect that the residents' reports of shadow figures might have some basis in reality. At approximately 10:45 p.m., Keene received a call from dispatch regarding a report of a prowler at one of the residences she had already passed. The caller, an elderly woman, reported hearing footsteps outside her home and seeing what she described as a dark person looking through her window. Keene proceeded immediately to the location, arriving approximately 5 minutes later. When Keene arrived at the residence, she found the elderly woman waiting outside her home, visibly frightened. "It was here just a moment ago," the woman said, pointing toward the side of her house. "I saw it looking in my window." Keene conducted a thorough search of the property, finding no signs of anyone prowling around the house. There were no footprints in the sandy soil, no disturbed vegetation, no indication that anyone had been there recently. The woman's description of what she had seen matched what Keene had been observing throughout her patrol, a dark figure that moved with unusual speed and seemed to vanish when observed directly. As Keene was preparing to leave the residence, she once again caught sight of movement in her peripheral vision. This time, rather than immediately turning to look directly at the movement, she continued to face the elderly woman while watching the figure from the corner of her eye. What she saw would later become the central mystery of her report. The figure appeared as a human-shaped shadow that moved along the edge of the property, maintaining a consistent distance of approximately 50 yards from Keene's position. It moved with a fluid grace that seemed unnatural, changing direction without the normal physical movements associated with human locomotion. Most unsettling was the fact that the figure appeared to be three-dimensional rather than a flat shadow cast by any object or light source. Keene slowly turned her head to observe the figure directly, but as she had experienced before, it vanished from view the moment she focused on it. When she looked away again, the figure reappeared in her peripheral vision, continuing its movement along the property line. This game of observation continued for several minutes, with the figure appearing only when Keene was not looking directly at it. After approximately 10 minutes of this unusual observation, Keene decided to try a different approach. She kept her gaze fixed on a point directly ahead of her while using her peripheral vision to track the figure's movement. In this way, she was able to observe the figure for a longer period, noting details that she had missed before. The figure appeared to be approximately 6 feet tall, with a vaguely human shape, but no discernible features, no face, no clothing, no characteristics that would identify it as a specific person. It moved along the property line with a steady pace, occasionally stopping as if observing something before continuing its movement. Most unsettling was the fact that the figure appeared to be solid rather than transparent, blocking the view of objects behind it despite its shadowy appearance. Keene radioed dispatch to report her observations, noting the unusual nature of what she was witnessing. The dispatcher, familiar with the community and its residents, acknowledged the report without surprise, noting that similar calls had been received from other residents over the past several weeks. As Keene continued to observe the figure, it began to move away from the property line, proceeding toward a nearby mesa. Keene decided to follow, maintaining her focus on a point ahead of her, while using her peripheral vision to track the figure's movement. The figure led her on a winding route through the desert, moving with a steady pace that Keene had difficulty matching in the rough terrain. The pursuit continued for approximately 20 minutes, with Keene following the figure deeper into the remote area. The cruiser's GPS system began to malfunction, showing the vehicle's location as a blank screen despite the clear view of the night sky. Keene's radio had by this point become increasingly difficult to use, with static making communication with dispatch challenging. When Keene reached the base of the mesa where the figure appeared to be heading, she once again attempted to observe it directly. As before, it vanished from view the moment she focused on it. This time, however, it did not reappear in her peripheral vision, apparently having disappeared for good. Keene conducted a thorough search of the area around the mesa, finding no signs of anyone having been there recently. There were no footprints in the sandy soil, no disturbed vegetation, no indication of where the figure might have gone. The only evidence of her pursuit was the track left by her cruiser in the desert terrain. The return journey proved challenging, as Keene found that the terrain appeared different from what she had observed on the way out. Landmarks that she had noted seemed to be missing or in different locations, making navigation difficult. After approximately 30 minutes of driving in what she believed was the direction of the community, Keene realized that she was lost a particularly dangerous situation in the remote desert where nighttime temperatures could drop rapidly. Keene stopped her vehicle and attempted to re-establish communication with dispatch, but the radio remained filled with static. Her cellular phone showed no service, and her GPS was still not functioning. Deciding to wait until morning rather than risk becoming more lost, Keene settled in for a long night in her cruiser, occasionally running the engine for air conditioning. What happened next would later become the most puzzling aspect of Keene's report. At approximately 3:45 a.m., Keene observed the figure again, this time appearing approximately 100 yards from her vehicle. Unlike before, the figure remained visible even when Keene looked directly at it, though it appeared less distinct than when viewed with peripheral vision. The figure stood motionless for several minutes before turning and moving away in the direction of Mexican Springs. After moving approximately 50 yards, it stopped and turned back toward Keene, as if waiting for her to follow. When Keene started her cruiser, the figure proceeded in the same direction, maintaining a consistent distance from the vehicle. The journey back to Mexican Springs proceeded without incident, with the figure leading the way through the desert terrain. When they reached the community approximately 25 minutes later, the figure stopped at the edge of the settlement, turned once more to face Keene, and then vanished into the darkness. The remainder of Keene's shift passed without incident. When she returned to the station at the end of her shift, she filed a detailed report of her experiences, including the unusual figure, the malfunctioning equipment, and the mysterious return journey led by the figure. Her supervisor, familiar with similar reports from the area, accepted the report without question, though he noted that it would likely remain one of the department's unexplained phenomena. The following day, Keene and another officer returned to the area where she had pursued the figure, attempting to locate the route she had followed. Despite extensive searching, they found no evidence of a path or trail beyond the tracks left by Keene's cruiser. The tracks showed only her vehicle's passage, with no second set of tracks indicating where the figure might have walked. Official Report 21-9027A documents this unusual encounter, noting the characteristics of the figure Keene observed, the malfunctioning equipment, and the mysterious return journey. The case remains unexplained in the department's files, with some officers privately suggesting that Keene may have encountered a spirit being, though no official explanation was ever offered. Keene continues to serve with the Navajo Nation Police Department, though she now approaches reports of unusual activity in remote areas with particular caution. She has never spoken publicly about what she believes happened that June night, but colleagues note that she sometimes carries traditional offerings on her patrols, particularly in areas known for spiritual significance. The community of Mexican Springs has continued to report sightings of similar figures since 2021, though none have been documented as thoroughly as Keene's experience. Local legends speak of shadow beings that sometimes appear to travelers, particularly during the summer months, though no direct connection has been officially established between these stories and the events of 2021. No definitive explanation was ever documented for the shadow figure that led Officer Keene astray and then guided her back to safety, nor for the unusual properties it displayed when observed directly versus peripherally. The American landscape remains vast and unknowable. Nowhere is this more evident than across the Navajo Nation, where ancient traditions intersect with modern law enforcement in ways that challenge conventional understanding. The tribal police officers who patrol these 27,000 square miles of high desert serve as guardians of both law and tradition, sometimes encountering phenomena that exist outside the boundaries of normal police work. The 8 accounts we've explored tonight represent only a fraction of the unexplained incidents documented in Navajo Nation police files. Each case, from the abandoned cruiser with its missing officer to the shadow figure that led one officer astray and then guided her back to safety, reminds us that there are forces at work in the world that defy our understanding of reality. What connects these disparate experiences is not just their mysterious nature, but the professional manner in which they were documented and investigated. The officers involved approached each incident with the same methodical attention to detail they would apply to any police matter, creating a record of events that acknowledges the limitations of conventional explanation while respecting the cultural context in which they occurred. In the high desert, where ancient beliefs persist alongside modern policing, some mysteries remain beyond resolution. The empty cruiser, the voice on the radio, the disappearing tracks, the watchers in the canyon, the lights at Kayenta, the vanishing hitchhiker, the silent community, and the shadow figure each stands as a reminder that even those sworn to protect and serve can become witnesses to phenomena that transcend ordinary experience. Perhaps the most significant aspect of these cases is not their unexplained nature, but the respectful way in which they were documented and preserved. The Navajo Nation Police Department has created a unique record of incidents that acknowledges both the limitations of conventional investigation and the possibility of explanations that exist outside mainstream understanding. These accounts serve as a bridge between worlds, between traditional beliefs and modern law enforcement, between the seen and unseen, between what can be explained and what must simply be accepted as part of the mysterious fabric of existence. In documenting these incidents, the officers involved have created a record that honors both their professional responsibilities and their cultural heritage. The high desert rules written in blood that tribal police officers follow include not just the regulations and procedures of modern law enforcement, but also an understanding that some things cannot be explained or resolved through conventional means. This dual approach to policing creates a unique balance that acknowledges both the practical and the spiritual aspects of keeping communities safe. As we conclude tonight's journey